Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. U.S. President Joe Biden meets French President Emmanuel Macron as they mark 200 years as allies. Foreign ministers from Europe's Security Organization meet for the first time since Russia invaded Ukraine. South Africa president faces impeachment threat over Farmgate scandal. My name is Femi Olanipeku. Now the news in detail. United States President Joe Biden has welcomed French President Emmanuel Macron to the White House as the two countries celebrate its 200th year as allies. President Biden stated that the alliances between the two countries remain essential to the mutual defenses of both countries and Europe at large. President Biden also condemned the brutal war of Russia in Ukraine, which he said had destroyed the peace in Europe. He said France and the U.S. are once again defending universal human rights and the democratic values, which is the heart of the relationship between the two countries. On his part, French President Emmanuel Macron said both countries need to work together to achieve world peace. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, foreign ministers has met in Lodz, Poland, for a ministerial meeting devoted largely to the war in Ukraine. Europe's largest security organization, one founded to maintain peace and stability on the continent, opened a meeting Thursday with strong denunciations of Russia's war against Ukraine. OSCE meeting in Lodz, Poland is the first high-level meeting of its kind since Russia invaded Ukraine in February. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was notably absent after he was banned by Poland, the current chair of the OSCE, from entering the country. The U.S. Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland, says she is more optimistic about the future of the organization, adding that Russia's president has failed in his brutal war of aggression against Ukraine.
I am departing Łódź more optimistic about the future of the OSCE even than I was when I arrived. Because just as he has failed to defeat Ukraine, President Putin, that is, despite his brutal war of aggression, his war crimes, and now his vicious fight against civilians, trying to freeze them in the middle of winter, Putin has also failed in his effort to divide or destroy the OSCE.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the United States and NATO are participants in the Ukraine war because of their support to Kyiv. Mr. Lavrov stated this in a news conference, stating that Washington and NATO were involved in the war because they were supplying arms to Ukraine and providing it with military training on their territory. Russian Foreign Minister also said the West had a real chance to avoid conflict in Ukraine, but chose to disregard Russian proposals to halt NATO enlargement and agree on a particular security status for Kyiv. Mr. Lavrov further accused NATO of starting tensions near China in a way that posed risks for Russia. And Spain says it will boost its security measures after a series of letter bombs was discovered in the country, including one that was sent to the country's prime minister last week. This comes after a letter bomb sent to an Air Force base near Madrid was discovered early this morning after one exploded at the Ukrainian embassy in the capital Madrid yesterday. In a statement, the Spanish Defense Ministry said a suspicious envelope was detected by a scanner at the base, adding that the scan indicated the envelope could have some type of mechanism inside. The ministry said that the police were called to the base to analyze the envelope, which was addressed to the satellite center at the air base. The United Nations has appealed for record funds for aid next year as the Ukraine war and other conflicts, climate emergencies, and the pandemic push more people into crisis and some towards famine. The United Nations Annual Global Humanitarian Overview estimates that 339 million people worldwide will need some form of emergency assistance next year, a staggering 65 million more people than the estimate a year ago. UN Aid Chief Martin Griffiths told reporters in Geneva that it meant next year is going to be the biggest humanitarian program the world has ever seen. He said if all the people in need of emergency assistance were in one country, it would be the third largest nation in the world after China and India. And the new estimate means that 1 in 23 people will need help in 2023 compared to 1 in 95 back in 2015.
Humanitarian assistance to 339 million people in 68 countries in 2023. 339 million people, a 25% increase of the total from 2022. 65 million people more next year than this. That increase is a steady increase in the last few years. Since 2019, if you look back at the trends, it's been going up steadily by about that amount. It's spiked with COVID, it went up.
Interpol has asked law enforcement agencies around the world to locate and provisionally arrest Angolan billionaire Isabel dos Santos. The Global Police Agency confirmed it issued a red notice for the tycoon, not an international arrest warrant, but a request to law enforcement worldwide to locate and provisionally arrest her pending her extradition. Angolan public prosecutor Helder Peter Gross told reporters this week that Angola had filed an international arrest warrant for dos Santos. And while dos Santos has said she is the victim of political persecution, the 49-year-old businesswoman, who is the daughter of Angola's late former president José Eduardo dos Santos, who ruled for 38 years until 2017, is facing corruption allegations. And Rwandan President Paul Kagame has accused his Democratic Republic of Congo counterpart of trying to find a way to have the DRC next elections postponed. President Kagame made the accusation while addressing members of parliament, stating that the Congolese leader Felix Tshisekedi is trying to implicate Rwanda in the country's crisis. Paul Kagame added, without providing any evidence, that the Congolese president didn't win the election that brought him in. He cautioned powerful countries, naming the US and UK, against accusing or believing that Rwanda was to blame for the instabilities in eastern Congo. He further accused United Nations forces of failing to eradicate the Rwandan rebel group FDLR and others operating in DR Congo. The Ethiopian ambassador to Kenya has said that the rebel Tigray People's Liberation Front TPLF will surrender its heavy weapons on Saturday following talks between senior army and the TPLF commanders. Ambassador Bacha Debele made the announcement in a video posted online, adding that the rebel group was supposed to surrender on 17 November, which was not implemented, but will now surrender on December 3. Mr. Bacha disclosed that the field commanders are meeting every day to discuss the disarmament process, and TPLF combatants are being assembled in designated areas. The ambassador also said it would be embarrassing to talk about the human cost of the war in public. The Ethiopian government and the TPLF signed a peace agreement in South Africa early this month to peacefully end the 2-year devastating war. You are watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. I'll be right back after this break.
It's a culture on its own. It has its own language, its own people, with their own way of life. The world of sports is never void of actions, stories, dramas, and scandals. I guess you need a sports show that can walk the walk and talk the talk.
On this show, we answer all your sporting questions. The whens, the whys, the wheres, and even the what ifs. Sports Spring is that show that will give you that new lease of life you've been looking for in sport journalism. Join me, Joseph Atewe,
And your sports Amazon, Nengi Ernest.
on this station, Western Spring Television, channel 190, only on Star Times.
Let's talk sports. Let's speak the most universal language of the world.
Thank you for staying with us. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is facing a possible impeachment threat over the farm gate scandal. The president has been accused of covering up a $4 million theft from his farm in 2020, including kidnapping and bribing the burglars into silence. A 3-volume report from an independent panel has found that Mr. Ramaphosa abused his position and may have broken an anti-corruption law. He has denied wrongdoing and said the money was from selling buffalo. The panel's findings have been handed to Parliament, but is set to examine them and decide whether or not to launch impeachment proceedings next week. The Israeli military has killed 2 Palestinians during a raid in the occupied West Bank's Jenin refugee camp after heavy clashes erupted. The Israeli military said troops came under fire and shot back during a Jenin area raid to arrest suspected militants. The Palestinian news agency reported that the men killed were 27-year-old Naim Jamal al-Zubaidi and 26-year-old Mohammed Ayman al-Saidi, adding that another man was also injured in the raid. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, this week's death raised the total number of Palestinians killed by Israel this year to 210. Chinese mourners are laying flowers outside the country's former leader Jiang Zemin's residence in his hometown Yangzhou, near Shanghai, after the former leader died on Wednesday. State media reported that the former leader died of leukemia and multiple organ failure in Shanghai at the age of 96, and that funeral preparations had begun. Jiang's death comes as China sees some of its most serious protests since Tiananmen, with many demonstrating against COVID restrictions. Former United States President Donald Trump's tax returns have been handed over to a committee of the U.S. House of Representatives after he lost a long legal battle to keep them sealed. The Treasury Department said it had complied with a Supreme Court order that the records should be given to the panel in the Democrats-controlled House. It is not clear if the returns will be made public or what they will reveal. Mr. Trump is yet to comment, but has previously denied any wrongdoing. He declined to release the documents during his 2016 presidential run or subsequently breaking a decades-old presidential custom. Mr. Trump recently announced a bid to run for the White House again in 2024 and has described the effort to obtain his tax documents as politically motivated. Canada has voiced its concern to the European Union over the union's proposed rules to curb deforestation. In a letter, the Canadian ambassador to the EU, Eilish Campbell, said the rules had burdensome requirements and will hurt trade between Canada and the EU. Ms. Campbell stated that Canada supports the objectives of the proposed deforestation regulation, but it is greatly concerned that some elements will cause trade barriers for Canadian exporters. The proposed European Union regulation aims to limit the trade of products linked to deforestation worldwide and would also cover forest degradation. Gang members have killed at least 12 people and burned down houses in a town near the capital of Haiti. The mayor of Cabaret Town, Joseph Jensen-Gulam, who confirmed the incident, said that the charred bodies of the deceased were found this morning. He added that the attacks came after police and residents forced gang members out from the town earlier in the week. Much of Haiti is controlled by powerful gangs, that have been targeting cabarets for months, which has disrupted the town's traffic and trade as it sits along a major road. Elon Musk has said he and Apple boss Tim Cook have resolved the misunderstanding over Twitter possibly being removed from the App Store. On Monday, Mr. Musk accused Apple of threatening to cut the platform from its App Store and said it had halted most of its advertising on the site. But the Twitter boss tweeted yesterday that Mr. Cook was clear that Apple never considered doing so. He did not say if Apple's advertising was discussed at the meeting. The meeting between the two tech leaders comes as many companies have halted spending on Twitter amidst concerns about Mr. Musk's content moderation plans for the site, a major blow to the company, which relies on such spending for most of its revenue. And in sports, Uruguay striker Luis Suarez has refused to apologize for his handball against Ghana at the 2010 World Cup ahead of a must-win tie against the Black Stars. Suarez was sent off in the last minute of extra time in the quarterfinal for denying the Black Stars a goal with a deliberate handball on the goal line. Asamoah Gyan missed the subsequent penalty and Uruguay went through. Suarez, speaking in the pre-game press conference, said he won't apologize, adding that he got a red card for the offense. Suarez said before the teams meet in a decisive Group G match that the Ghana player missed the penalty and not him. Ghana play Uruguay knowing a win would send them into the knockout stage, but a defeat would see the South American side progress if South Korea failed to beat Portugal. But before we end Spring Global today, here is a recap of our top stories. United States President Joe Biden has welcomed French presidents to the White House as the two countries celebrate its 200th year as allies. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, foreign ministers are meeting in Lodz, Poland, for the first time since Russia invaded Ukraine. And South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is facing a possible impeachment threat over the Farmgate scandal. Don't forget to follow us on social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. Thank you so much for watching Spring Global. My name is Femi Olanike.